how did you guys feel about Karp's monologue going into the earnings? So I heard it was 8 minutes. I mean, I have some thoughts on it, but overall, I thought he tried to make the story of Palantir more evident. I think maybe some of the sentences were a little mistimed, given he probably knew the market was not going to like earnings, so it kind of just sounded a little weird. But let's start with Arny. How'd you kind of feel about Karp's monologue?
Well, my personal feeling is that everything Karp says, I want to hear him very carefully. I like his style. I think Karp is what makes Palantir unique. So I personally appreciate him. I'm aware that people on Wall Street have a completely different mindset, like is really the opposite mental framework. Therefore, everything that is out of the standard is something that pisses them off. And Wall Street people are generally used to that kind of CEO that starts the conference underlining, oh yes, everything went up because of this reason, went down for this reason. So very on the business, while Karp is on the philosophical side. I think that helps long term. Short term, we know that analysts don't like Palantir unless you fully embrace Palantir vision, philosophy. You probably think, okay, this guy is just weird. I don't like him. I personally love hearing him. I think he is very smart, deep, and knows how to empower people doing their best. So I think he's the best CEO Palantir can have. We need to accept that his way of behaving will be not appreciated for a long time.
Dom, your thoughts on his monologue?
I was fine with like Arny said. I mean, anytime he speaks, I want to hear it. I was excited that he was presenting. I think to Arny's point around how Wall Street receives Karp and Palantir in general, I do believe this is a company or a stock that you have to actually have some expertise in this area to really appreciate the differentiation and the uniqueness and competitive advantages that they have in the market, because then you really get it. I could understand why it's hard for some people, who don't work in software and all these other things, not to say they can't study up and dive into. They put tons of material on for you to have a high level of appreciation. But with some of the stuff what they've done with Apollo and some of the other things coming with the pay-as-you-go service and their approach and how they can make these customized operating systems. One of my buddies said he was at a conference with Microsoft, and he said, what about moving to the edge and people like Snowflake or Palantir that create custom operating systems for enterprises? Doesn't that kind of flip the cybersecurity game all on its head when you could have, all these different tailored operating systems for organizations, which they're building on top of the ontology? It kind of is a direct competition to someone like Microsoft, who's a centralized operating system. And he's exactly right. And the Microsoft guy gave him an evil glare. And so I just think, you really have to understand what they're doing. I watched their video they just posted about their trying to get people to want to work for them, just like their experience of, they believe in a culture with small teams and small teams running customer projects, like big projects. Like they were listing all the Airbus projects, the NHS and everything else, and working in the software industry for almost 20 years now. I can tell you it's a lot easier to move nimbly and flexible to drive fast results when you work in a small amount of teams and to make adjustments and fail early than in a big, giant organization where things just are not going to move as fast. There's going to be a lot of, conflict and who agrees with what. But when you have a small team and it lies on their responsibility, that just made me really think about all the new 40 customers they added and more coming. I think they're going to keep accelerating.
Kris, your thoughts on Karp's monologue?
So I'm gonna get flamed for this, but I've accepted it. I practiced this.
Spicy.
So I think Alex Karp is really good at being a professor. All right. His entire background is in getting a philosopher's mind. When you're a professor, that's what you're doing. You're not trying to literally build something, you're trying to get other people to build for you, right? So imagine a professor right now going to college, in college, like explaining theory to people, saying, okay, here's all the stuff that you need theoretically to change the world. It's your job to change the world. So in that front, I think Alex Karp does a great job. Where I think he fails is where his lack of business sense comes into the picture. All right. You cannot keep having structural changes in your organization and think that every single time people are going to be forgiving about it. Okay. Even he's admitted that they've made mistakes. Like they had products that were way ahead of time back in 2012 and they weren't able to capitalize on it.
Are you saying the CEO has a lack of business sense?
Yeah, totally.
How does he a CEO then?
So that's the thing. He's a founder, right? He's a founder CEO. So basically, he started this with an idea, and he was able to raise capital and other people to build on that vision. Which I think
Peter and company wanted him to be CEO. They went to Europe to recruit him.
Well, here's the thing. So Alex Karp, they recruited him, right, to basically guide the vision for the company, right? Initially, they just wanted someone to kind of like hold the line. They weren't exactly hoping that he was going to be the CEO, right? They were like, okay, we need someone that's going to be the adult in the room. That's what they've said, right? Which Karp more than did. But one thing, like I said, Karp makes people feel warm and fuzzy. I think in terms of retaining employees, getting really smart employees to work on challenging tasks, I think Alex Karp by far is really good at that, right? Getting products to a point where they're able to develop them. But outside of developing them, you also need to sell them. And you need to sell them to the wide masses. All right. So when you think about a business,
I don't think that's his role, though. I think that's the COO and CFO. Like Sankar should be running that part of the business, right? Like that should be his bread and butter. And what Karp's doing is he's keeping a culture and talent there because of what he's fostered. And that's the leadership he brings.
And normally I would agree with you. But if you think about it, they said that Karp was the one-man sales operation the entire time, right? So which chief executive is going out there trying to look for deals, right? Trying to get deals done. The entire time that they could have been developing a sales, you're telling me a software company has only started developing a sales force after 17 years of being in existence? They should have been developing a sales force 5 years ago when they actually started making these products. These are the kinds of things that a business person knows, like, hey, we can't build products but not have a sales team to go along with it way before time. Right now, they're behind the 8 ball. No matter how good your product is, now you got to get people sales trained. You got to get in people with industry relationships that are going to cost you money. Whereas guess what? If you had done this 5 years ago when you were still much younger, before you went public, right now, you would have been growing like crazy and the valuations would have made a lot more sense, right? Right now, they're already behind the 8 ball. And guess what? The one thing I see right now that I really hope Palantir really takes to heart is that there are competitors out there that are gunning for the same space. In VMware is doing its job. They're a multinational business. They have great leadership. They're targeting some of the same spaces that Palantir is already in. Salesforce is doing the exact same thing, right? A good CEO knows when to get in, develop something, and do it way ahead of time so that, guess what? You are that 0 to 1 before anyone else can get in.
But Kris, the 0 to 1, do you think Karp genuinely believed they were already that monopoly that they didn't need to do the sales, and that's kind of his business sense, but it just wasn't the correct one in this case?
That's what, like, I feel like he didn't care. Like, I feel like he already felt like they were at that point and was actually against wanting to hire a sales force for so long. but then it kind of came evident over time that you have to. You
And
have
he was wrong about it. He was wrong.
Yeah.
They didn't sell the product as much as he thought.
And what surprised me about it is that you have Peter Thiel, who literally wrote the book on why you need to have a software sales team, and you're not listening to the guy.
Well,
So my
that's what
question,
makes me wonder, how much is Peter involved in this operation?
I'm glad you say that. That is exactly right.
Because
I
I've
think
always
early-
thought about that. I've read the book several times, and I've just always wondered, when you read his book, you're like, some things I see his fingerprints on, but on the operational stuff and like the go-to-market, I don't see his fingerprints on.
No, and even the culture that's there, it's not as Peter Thielish as you would believe, right? It's more Alex Karpish, right? And what's funny is sometimes when I actually talk to some of the employees and everything else, they have so much disdain for Peter Thiel, but have so much respect for Alex Karp, right? So I can kind of like see that, you know what, this company is built around the philosophies of Alex Karp, not Peter Thiel. Even though they're part of the same company, they're on the same board of directors, they're both the same thing. Guess what? Each one still thinks independently, and that's usually a good thing. It's like they're having two sides to a coin, right? I think Peter Thiel at this point should be more involved in some of the business decisions in growing Palantir. Because if people like Joe Lonsdale and Peter Thiel were more involved with that part of it, I think Palantir could do really well. Because guess what? They know how to nurture a business, whereas Alex Karp knows how to nurture an idea. So that's what I would say. Some people are really good at business operations. A good example of someone who's really good at business operations is the CEO of Snowflake. Look at them. It's a columnar database, all right? Everyone right here, it's a columnar database, all right? It's not that special, but he knows how to sell. He knows how to get it into the hands of the people. And guess what? That's not his one company that he's been successful at. This is his second one. He built ServiceNow to be one of the monsters out there right now.
It's actually his third. He did Data Domain as well.
And Data Domain before it was acquired. So if you look at it, there are people that are serial producers, right? This is Alex Karp's first rodeo in 17 years, and he hasn't proven or lived up to the idea of getting us to the point where it's going to be super profitable for us. I am in it because I believe in the technology, not so much that I believe in Alex Karp's leadership. I like listening to him. I think it's like listening to a college professor, but that doesn't mean that I like him in terms of developing the business.
Arny, I'll get to you in a second. What I was going to say on that is, I think what you said about when Karp is Karp is a philosophical salesman in terms of, and philosophical salesman to me is like getting people to buy into your vision and like fund it. So like when he was talking to the CIA's venture capital firm and all these private investors over the past 17 years, he probably sold them a vision through his philosophical speaking that got them to believe in the 0 to 1 philosophy at the conjunction of protecting Western democracy and then the actual technology, all that stuff. And he was able to put a narrative together. And that works for raising capital. And that works for getting people to believe in the vision. That works for recruiting people away from Google and Facebook. But that doesn't work for actually selling like a product and getting dollars in, because that is political. That's relationship based. That's like, if Microsoft knows these people, their sales teams are going to get a better inning to actually close the deal. So that's where you need a real sales force. And I think you're absolutely correct that he has that vision, but it's just a question of now actually developing that sales force. Arny, your thoughts on this idea that Karp doesn't really have business sense when it comes to selling product?
I think he has a business sense, but he has different priorities. His first priority is preserving the culture. He wasn't really fan of the idea of getting listed because he knows that if you become listed, you have much pressure to start growing fast. And if you grow faster, you risk of losing your identity. So as a CEO, his main focus is, okay, how can I preserve the culture? Our culture is unique. He always insists on that. And I believe it. For sure, things are not easy at the beginning because this is the first. Imagine after you are private for so long, you develop a certain mind frame. And now as a public company, you need to change everything. You have a pressure quarter by quarter, while in the past they could focus only on delivering the best products they thought for their clients, being a commercial or government, and now they have the pressure of the slowdown in the government business for a quarter. And probably if you ask him, hey, what do you think about that? He says, where's the problem? But
unfortunately,
when you're
Arny,
listed,
yeah. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
When you're listed, you have all the eyes on you. So that is positive because generates some pressure for sure. Seeing him kind of frustrated. I love the comment I received on Twitter, underlining that he seemed frustrated, but that could be a good sign because if you are smart and frustrated, you become smarter. And I believe Palantir could get smarter. I think we are gradually seeing Palantir getting smarter, despite the business is not something like a Tesla. You sell a Tesla, you have a good product, you sell it, and you immediately receive the results. The results we can see in the short time is just the number of clients increasing, the existing clients expanding, but still, it takes time.
Yeah, that's what I was going to echo was, and I said this in the video that I'll post later this weekend, we really haven't given them a lot of grace. And what I mean by that, I know the price has gone down significantly, but when you look at Foundry and them being now, September, it'll be 2 years of public company. The product is already standing on its own. The technology is there. Most companies don't have an exponential great product that is 10x better than a lot of things out there. If they can continue to modularize and split that up and find new customer bases to go into, I think they'll be fine from that perspective. But to Arny's point, they are getting smarter. They are figuring out how they have to play the game. And they haven't yet hired top sales talent. Like, imagine when they're profitable and have more cash to throw at salespeople in other situations. They're just rolling, they're just getting the momentum, but they've already got the hard part already knocked out of the way, which is the product.
So a couple of more things, and I'm not trying to bash on Alex Karp or Palantir or anything else, but to Arny's point, culture doesn't pay the bills, right? Cultures can only retain employees for a certain period of time before those employees are going to get frustrated and say, look, I'm wasting my time, I'm wasting my youth in trying to help you build your idea, and it's not going anywhere. Majority of the reason why they actually even went public is because they had an uprising among their own employees to say, listen, we want to unlock liquidity. Right? Even they've admitted and said, look, if it was up to me, we wouldn't have gone public. But guess what? We had tons of employees who wanted to unlock that liquidity. Well, guess what? That's what happened, right? So the question is, Alex Karp can set a good vision, but at this point, you got to pivot I wouldn't say pivot your business, but you got to be reasonable about your businesses.